Hello and welcome. I'm Jo Huey and I'm a personal change expert, author and adult child of an alcoholic. Today I'm going to talk to you about relationships. We all have them, some more than others, and some have relationships that are closer than others. But whatever relationships you have, you'll experience a range of different emotions, challenges and experiences. First of all, as a child of an alcoholic, I really struggled to have a relationship with my father. He was absent a lot of my life and I never really had the connection with him that I'd have liked. It wasn't until I reached secondary school that I really started to notice difficulties in my relationships, in my friendships with girls at school. I couldn't get on with the girls in my class and I was very opinionated at that time and I totally lacked any kind of tact. I felt misunderstood and people just didn't get me. I was lonely and felt very disconnected. I struggled with bullying and it was just a really difficult time. And that carried on into my adult life. And by the time I reached my early 20s and my dad passed away, I realised that I needed some help. My friendships were breaking down and I just didn't like how I was feeling. If you've been affected by someone else's drinking at some point in your life, then you'll probably relate to some of my story and what I share in this video.
First, I want to go through the key issues for children of alcoholics. I've outlined them on the screen in front of you, and these are typical of what adult children of alcoholics will face in their relationships. There are more, but these are just some that you may understand and experience yourself. So how can you have better relationships? How can you start to feel more confident in the relationships that you have? How can you weather the storm when things get tough, knowing that it will be okay and you bounce back? I'll get straight to the point because, to be honest with you, I hate videos that go on for ages and then only at the very end tell you something useful. Some of the things I've learned after 20 years of self-development and therapy have been really helpful to me in my relationships. And I want to share these with you and share what's helped me to transform my relationships and how I feel in them. So let's get started. So here I outline my learnings from being in relationships, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about each of these so that you understand the connection with where it's come from, why it may be causing you issues in your relationships now, and the things that you can do to overcome them. And of course, there is a lot more to relationships than what you see here, but I go through this in more detail in my ebook and module for relationships that I offer. I just wanted to get started with thinking about some areas that, we probably both struggle with from being a child of an alcoholic. So one of the things is about taking on other people's issues and their baggage and how it isn't our responsibility. Also, I found that it's really important to have resilience in relationships and actually resilience in our life. And this is probably something that you haven't been taught as a child. Also in relationships, I feel that both parties do need to make an effort. It can't just be one way all of the time. So I talk a bit more about that. Obviously, communication is key and we need to be aware of that when we are in relationships, which I know a lot of children of alcoholics will find challenging. So again, I talk a little bit more about that. And also something which I know children of alcoholics will struggle with is that just because someone reacts to something that you say or did in a negative way doesn't mean what you've said, was wrong. And that's about making sure that we're doing what's right for us, which is obviously something that we may not have done as a child. And then I think as well, the best chance for a healthy relationship is to have one with yourself. And by far, I think that's the most important thing. So I go into more detail later on in this video. So let's get cracking. What I mean by people's baggage isn't your responsibility is that when other people have got issues, you shouldn't feel like you need to take that on and help them solve it and be there for them and do everything for them. You can certainly be supportive, and that is hopefully what you would want to do for the other person, but there needs to be some divide between how much of that you take on and how much of that is your own stuff. Why do you need to feel like, you're taking on somebody else's problems? Because ultimately they're an adult as well, and it's down to them to, manage their own issues. Obviously, as a child of an alcoholic, you're going to be used to potentially looking after the alcoholic, doing things that maybe a child of an alcoholic shouldn't, or a child shouldn't do. But as you grow into an adult, that behaviour is no longer healthy and it no longer serves you. So we need to learn how to start looking after ourselves and realising the divide between our problems and somebody else's. So, I want to say that to have empathy and to relate to someone and to be able to say, I understand where you're coming from, or I understand how hard that is, rather than, oh, you poor thing, because that doesn't help anybody. Sometimes we need it. Sometimes we just want someone to feel sorry for us, but it depends on how long we stay in that place for. If we can empathise with somebody, they'll feel connected and understood. And I expect you've wanted that for yourself at some stage of your life. So I know that I have. So being supportive of someone is a good thing, and we want to be understanding and empathetic, but we do need these boundaries. And again, as a child of an alcoholic, we probably haven't been taught about boundaries, and we've probably been taught that we should do so much for other people and, irrelevant of what's important to us, or to, look after ourselves. And so when we encounter conversations or people are expecting us to do things that are beyond what we feel comfortable doing, we need to put boundaries in place, physical boundaries, like a fence would keep, maybe pets out or whatever. It's the same type of thing. We need to, have things in place where we feel comfortable to enforce them. There's absolutely no point having boundaries if you're not going to enforce them. So we're going to have a look at that in more detail in my ebook, in my module, but we'll also have a look at it in here in this video. Resilience in your life is key, and it is important to have resilience in your relationships. I never really understood what it meant, so I'm going to explain in more detail. So imagine a very unstable tree. The roots aren't really running deep, and it tends to wobble about with any small wind. Now imagine a tree with solid roots, sturdy and robust. When the wind comes, it moves its leaves, but it pretty much stands firm. This is how I describe resilience. When you're feeling off balance, it won't take much to tip you over. So in order to build resilience, so that you are standing firm and you can cope with whatever is thrown at you, you need to put some things in place. Habits take, on average, 66 days to form, and that depends on the person and the habit. So next we're going to have a look at how you can build some resilience. Being resilient means that you have got the ability to come back after difficulties, to be able to cope in difficult times. Now, as a child of an alcoholic, you've probably had to do that in your life to some degree, but without learning how to cope and have strategies and techniques to help you, it's not something that comes easy, I wouldn't think. I know it hasn't been for me, but it's been one of the biggest things that's made a difference to my life. So how can you build resilience? First of all, you need to look after your physical and mental health. So things like getting enough sleep, eating healthily, and doing some exercise, and all the usual things that you would imagine that you'd need to do for your physical and mental health. The next one is finding a higher power. Now, before you go off or dismiss this, bear with me. I had a very anti-religious father, and he was very strict about religion and things like that. And so I have found it particularly difficult to embrace having a higher power because it goes against what he taught me. However, as part of programs like Al-Anon, which is a family group that supports children and families of alcoholics, that is the first place I really learnt about a higher power. And then subsequently to that, I learnt about it in my mindfulness course that I did. And it's the one thing that's really helped me with anxiety and this need to control which ultimately we don't really control most things. We just like to feel we are. And so I would really want you to try and embrace this, because it can make a massive difference to your life. And we need to have a balance with our mind, our body and our spirit, not just one or the other. It has to be all of them. So finding a higher power could be somebody that's passed, that, you know, a family member, friend, whoever. It could be a religion. It could be a group of people that you know. It could be friends, angels, whatever it is that you would feel comfortable as a starting point. If you don't already have something already, maybe you have a religion, so this isn't going to be a difficult one for you. It really just lets you let go of the how, because if you have anxiety and things and worry too much, often we're concerned about the how. How is this going to be fixed? How am I going to get a job? Where is the money going to come from? How's that going to happen? And that's what stresses us out. So if you have a higher power and you start to look to ask for help when you really are feeling quite stressed, then doing that on a regular basis is going to help you build resilience, because when difficulties come, you know that you don't have to find the answer yourself. You have a higher power that can help you. So hopefully that makes sense. I just wanted to spend a bit more time explaining that, because I know that I had resistance to it. So I wanted to just kind of put your mind at rest. The next thing is about putting things in place for when things get tough. So being prepared, really, and having people that you can call, places that you can go to that will help, resources to help you reduce your stress, give you knowledge and information. And often the reason that we struggle to cope and be resilient is because we're fearing the unknown and we aren't in a great place ourselves. So if we can have some things in place, then when stuff does get bad, then we're kind of already prepared. Gratitude is the next thing, and I started to do a gratitude journal a long time ago, and I found it really helpful. And I often walk around my flat at everything I have and the people in my life, and I feel so very grateful. And I think this really does help you build up some resilience, because you feel confident in your life and what you have, and you feel very lucky and fortunate. And it helps you to get some perspective, as there's always somebody in a worse position than us, isn't there? So I think having a gratitude journal will really help to build your resilience. And lastly, I've put about reflection, because if we reflect on how far we've come, we've overcome terrible situations. If you've lived with an alcoholic, it has no doubt been a challenge. And so this can help encourage you and to prove that you are able to cope in difficult times. And so when a situation arises and you realise, if you're reflecting on a regular basis, you'll know that when a situation comes up, you'll get over it, you'll cope, something will happen, something will manifest, and it will be okay. And so I think if we do that reflection on a regular basis, rather than every now and again, then it becomes a habit and our resilience will start to build. So hopefully all of that makes sense. Next, we're going to have a look at effort. No matter who the relationship is with, if it's a friend, partner, work colleague or family, both people in the relationship need to make an effort. Sometimes this isn't always balanced. It depends on what's happening at the time for each person. You'll have times when you're more able to put in the effort and times when others are. Living in a home of alcoholism often means that you are the one putting in the effort. You're the one having to help around the house, look after siblings, think of everyone else. I learnt that it's very easy for me to make the effort. As a child of an alcoholic, I'm so used to being responsible. I'm great at looking after others, putting others first and making sure everyone else is okay. I go above and beyond. Maybe that sounds familiar to you. If you feel overall in your relationships with someone that it seems to be one way, it's probably worth taking a closer look at it. Children of alcoholics do tend to make an effort, often because we want people to like us. We want acceptance, to be loved and valued. I'll explain some suggestions I have about effort in relationships that have been helpful to me. So you'll see the bullet points that I've put up on the screen. So I want you to think about giving others an opportunity to make an effort. So are there some things that you can do to pull back? Maybe to give the other person the opportunity to contribute more. So also, are you making it too easy? So if you're making it too easy for someone, then they tend not to make an effort because they rely on you. Maybe you're always the one that organises things and your friends just sort of turn up. So if you didn't organise it, would they then make an effort? So try not to make it too easy for people if this is something that bothers you. Also, asking within for answers. I believe it's important for us to get our own answers when things are going tough, when we are feeling challenged by something. So if you feel like you're putting in too much effort in a relationship, what I would like you to do is just sit down with your eyes closed. You have your feet firmly on the floor and imagine that they're rooted into the earth. And just simply ask, why do I feel like I'm making all the effort in this relationship? Or whatever question you think is relevant. And then just wait for a response. It will come to mind, but you need to trust it. And I know this might sound a bit odd, and if you're not used to doing this type of thing, because maybe you don't feel you've got control over it. But if you just give it a go, see how you feel. Just close your eyes, sit down, ask the question. And you can do this with anything that you're having challenges with. But in regards to this, ask about why you feel like you're making all the effort. Then next is about physical and emotional reasons. So is someone not making an effort because they literally physically can't, or they're under emotional stress themselves? So that could be a reason why someone isn't making an effort in a relationship. And we have to be understanding and, reasonable to that, because I'm sure we've all been through difficult times. Next is about space. So maybe you feel that you need some space from somebody, or that, what can you do to feel more comfortable in that relationship? I know in my relationships, I felt that I have made way too much effort and it's been very one-sided, and then, resentments crop up and I feel like I'm giving much more of myself than I really want to. And that's also linked to boundaries as well. And, some people find it very difficult to say no. Communication is the last thing. And again, something which children of alcoholics do struggle with. So communicating with people, explaining how you feel about the effort. Maybe you feel like you're making more effort, giving more in that particular relationship, and you'd like to understand why they aren't meeting you halfway. I do understand that, again, children of alcoholics struggle to say how they feel, so you might have to spend some time just thinking first about how you're feeling. And I think sitting down and asking the question that I suggested earlier is a good place to start. So next we're going to be having a look at communication in more detail. It probably comes as no surprise to you that you need to communicate with the person you're in a relationship with. This can be in any situation, whether it's a work relationship or a personal one. I know some children of alcoholics will find this extremely difficult. It's likely that you've been taught not to speak up, so doing this is the opposite to what you know. Often what stops people speaking up is the reaction that they'll get, or that they think that they will get. I spoke about this earlier. If you feel fearful of speaking up, maybe you can have someone with you if that's appropriate. Maybe prepare some set phrases of what you can say in certain situations. For example, I'm not sure, can I get back to you? Or I'll need to check that, I'll let you know. If you don't speak up in your relationships, you can't blame the other person for not knowing what you do and don't want, how you feel or what you think. They aren't mind readers. Being able to communicate your truth to others is important because you deserve to be heard. What you have to say is of value, and no one has the right to tell you otherwise. Sometimes you may choose to communicate through writing, an email, a letter, whatever is easier for you. You may choose to start communicating in that way first, which will help build your confidence to speaking face to face. Overcoming any fear you have about communicating difficult things takes time. I use a brilliant technique called emotional freedom technique. It clears negative energy in the body by tapping with your fingertips on certain points of the body whilst repeating a set phrase. Issues around communication come from your past, so finally letting them go will be a massive relief. Communicating good stuff is important too. Most people enjoy hearing compliments and nice things about what they've achieved, done, or just generally about them as a person. It boosts confidence. So start to get great at sharing positive things with others. That may be a great way to get your communication into practice. If you have no problem communicating the nice stuff, then focus on overcoming the more challenging by using the techniques I'm suggesting here. The most important thing I can share from my experience is this. When there's a challenge to discuss, know that you aren't the only person that can come up with the ideas and suggestions. You aren't the only one that can fix it. That can happen when you discuss the issue with the other person or people. Making an assumption about how someone will react to what you say is mind reading, and unless I'm mistaken, that's not possible. Your mind is full of thoughts. Just remember that they are not accurate or factual. Challenge yourself and avoid believing what your head tells you. I learnt an amazing technique when I did a course in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP for short. It's a key tool used for communication, having better relationships and conversations with others, and understanding with more clarity what is meant by what is said. The technique is called the meta model. It looks to recover information which is missing, changed, or generalised. To give an example, when people make statements like, "She never does what I ask," or "He never shows he loves me," they're big sweeping statements. The use of the word never is generalised. It tends to create an image in your mind that something has never happened, when in reality it probably has. So it's not an accurate representation of reality. Using this technique helps you to have a more accurate understanding of the situation, which in turn changes how you think about it. So in response to that statement, you could say, "So has there ever been a time when she has done what you asked? Or has there ever been a time when he's shown that he loves you?" This gets the person thinking about what they've said. They process it in their minds and then often come back with something like, "Well, okay, yeah, she does sometimes," or, "Well, yeah, he did get me some flowers on Valentine's Day." So in this example, the statement's gone from never to sometimes. See how it works? It's so easy to make assumptions, mind read, and think we know what someone else is thinking, wants, or feels. We just can't know that. For me, this was a total shift in my thinking when it came to my relationships. I started to have less drama, which is what I'd been used to in my home. Instead, I had calmer and more accurate conversations. I felt better because often what I thought about negatively often wasn't the case at all, and my mind was playing tricks on me. I've provided a link in the YouTube description for you to access more information about the meta model so that you can learn other questions to ask when people miss out, change, or generalise in their conversations with you. You can also start to pay attention to the words that you use. Are you generalising when you communicate? Do you miss out information which causes other people to get confused? If you've said things like, "She knows I like her," to someone that you don't know that well, it's likely that they're going to say to you, "Who's she?" Because you've missed out that vital piece of information. The person will then have a clearer understanding of who you're talking about. We're going to take a look at how other people react to things that we have said or done. So we're going to look at boundaries, your stuff versus other people's stuff, and taking responsibility. Just because someone reacts negatively to something you say or do doesn't necessarily mean that you've done anything wrong. It's an interesting one. Most people hate saying or doing something that upsets others, of course. And as a child of an alcoholic, I was raised to be very concerned about what other people thought of me, what I said, what I did. And I feared how the alcoholic in my life would react. And I really struggled to cope with the response that I got. I didn't often put myself first or do what I wanted. I was taught to please others at my own cost. So when I did start to say and do what I wanted, often others didn't like it. They weren't used to me acting in that way. This is all to do with boundaries. I wasn't taught them, and I suspect you probably weren't either. And what we're happy to accept and not accept in our relationships is important, and we need to know what that is. In the What Everyone Needs to Know About Relationships ebook, I go into more detail about boundaries. If you think of a child, when they're being told off or not given something that they want, they don't like it, do they? They aren't getting their own way. It's no different to adults, who are mostly children walking around in adult bodies anyway. Generally, in healthy relationships, people respect each other's boundaries. If someone doesn't want to do something, they accept it. You might say something that upsets someone, but it isn't anything that you said, but it may trigger something in that person that they're sensitive about, and then they obviously may react in an unpleasant way. That's not your fault. What's important is to recognise when it is your stuff and when it's somebody else's. You can't take responsibility for how someone reacts. It is not your business. You can't control it, so don't even bother. We're each responsible for ourselves, and you could say the same thing to 1, 2, 3, 4 people and get different responses. So how can it be what you've said? It's about how that person interprets what you've said, or if it's triggering something in them. I learned that if what I say negatively affects a lot of people, then I need to look at myself. But if what I've said is only affecting or getting a reaction from one person or 2 people, then it's probably likely that it isn't my stuff and it's theirs. The best chance at a healthy relationship with other people is to have one with yourself first. This took me quite a while to realise, I'm not going to lie. At the root of most things is the relationship that you have with yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you take care of yourself, how you talk to yourself, and how much you believe in yourself. From my experience, a lot of the challenges that I've had in relationships have been connected to issues I've felt about myself. My low self-esteem, self-doubt, low confidence, fear, anxiety, the list goes on. Once I started looking at that and addressing it, my relationships got better. I started to be more grateful about what I had in my life. I felt better about who I was and accepted myself. I learnt to love the nice parts and the not so great parts. So by working on myself, it transformed my relationships, and I'm not over-exaggerating that. It really did. My relationship with my alcoholic father wasn't great. I struggled to be understood by my mum too. So I felt very alone and disconnected. I felt odd and weird, and no one got me. When I started to understand more about me, boundaries, realising that everything is not my fault, and I don't have to do what others want. I don't have to please them, and I don't have to forgo my needs. My life actually got so much better. It got amazing. As they say, if you can't love yourself, how can you expect others to? This again is in all your relationships. If you don't believe in your capabilities, it affects how you perform in your job, how you communicate with colleagues, and how secure or insecure you feel in what you do and what you offer. I go into a lot more detail in my Bring Some Mindset Magic to Your Relationships module, and we start to look at your inner child and how that affects your life as an adult. As I've said, this is by far the most important aspect of yourself and your relationships. And so for me, if you don't start to look at this, then you will always struggle with issues in your relationships, because if you don't feel good about yourself, then there'll always be problems in your relationships. Because I find that for me, whenever I've had a difficulty with somebody, a disagreement, if I feel jealous or whatever, it's an insecurity in me. It's nothing that they've done. It taps into something that's not right within me. I'm not saying everything is our fault, but I do believe that If we can't look after ourselves first and foremost, then we shouldn't be having relationships with other people if we aren't going to commit the time and effort into our own lives and looking after us, because we need to make sure that we are physically healthy, emotionally healthy, we have a spiritual connection, because then we can have better relationships with other people. And I think that when we forgo that and when we put ourselves to the back burner, actually it can be exceptionally damaging to our relationships, because if we don't give ourselves the time, often if we're stressed at work or whatever, you can come home and take it out on your kids, on your partner or whoever that might be, and that issue isn't about them, it's about you. And if you're feeling like you're not looking after yourself, or don't even really know yourself that well and don't know what is important to you or what it is that you want in your life, then it's going to have an impact on all the relationships that you have, whether that's with somebody at work or someone you're in an intimate relationship with. So I hope that you found this helpful, and the next step would be to look at my ebook and also my Bring Some Mindset Magic to Your Relationships, which I will explain more in the next clip. I hope you found this a practical and helpful video. I know you'll probably have more questions and be hungry to find out more. So I've prepared an ebook on what everyone should know about relationships. Again, I've written this with you in mind, children of alcoholics. I've been there, so I get it. I'm sharing with you what's taken me 2 decades to learn and cost in excess of £20,000. I want to shortcut you to the important parts, saving you time and money. If you'd like to delve even deeper, you can take the Bring Some Mindset Magic to Your Relationships online module. It's full of practical tools and tips, videos, audios, and exercises to get you thinking with a new mindset and put these practical tips into practice. You can also join me in the Change Your Mind Facebook group should you have any questions from this video or anything else that you'd like to know. I hope you continue your journey with me, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.